From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
And good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the program today. And we prepare this show on Thursday afternoon. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I hate to.
You have a lot you got going on in your media world.
Where did I conjure up Thursday?
From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
And good morning and welcome to our program. And we prepare this show on Friday afternoon for our Sunday morning broadcast. So it was just hours ago on this Friday that the news broke here in Utah that the Republican Party may break from the Utah Debate Commission and set up its own debates for its primary candidates. This comes as we are now a little more than 2 weeks out from those Republican primary debates scheduled by the Utah Debate Commission. And it's an interesting thing. We've been reading all kinds of headlines. One of them was from the Deseret News that said, is the Utah Republican Party trying to protect Senator Mike Lee from a primary election debate? The Salt Lake Tribune, their headline said, Utah GOP wants a say on topics and moderators for the next Republican primary debates. Well, we have invited a special guest to join us, Erik Nielsen, who is the executive director of the Utah Debate Commission. First of all, welcome. We have this scenario that I just talked about where people are going, what in the world is going on? Why is the GOP telling their candidates to keep their powder dry, don't commit to anything right now? And it just feels a little unique, a little funny, honestly. And then we have the GOP just today come out that, well, you know, maybe we'll go ahead and do our own debates. I know you're in an interesting situation. I'm not asking you to just, you know, absolutely tackle those necessarily, but the Utah Debate Commission over the years seems to have a fairly good reputation of bipartisanship or nonpartisanship even, you know, with Republicans and Democrats and academicians and, you know, people of high repute, let me put it that way, to kind of make sure that these debates are fair, whether it's a Republican primary or whether it's Republicans, Democrats, and independents that are running. What's your reaction to what the GOP is doing?
I have a couple of reactions. I think, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. You know, you're exactly right. The Debate Commission, the Utah Debate Commission it's a nonpartisan independent board of media partners and academics and universities. And we are truly that, independent and nonpartisan. And I have not been around a group of people with so many divergent views, divergent political views, who are so singularly minded that they want to put together a completely nonpartisan, independent debate. That is everybody's focus. Everybody wants the best debate going forward. And we have a track record of that. We've been doing this since 2000. Our committee was formed, our commission was formed in 2013. Our first round of debates was in 2014. I think we've accomplished that, and we plan to keep doing that in the future.
It's interesting, too, and I recognize that this is a quote-unquote Republican primary, but for many Utahns, being realistic about at least the lay of the land right now, and especially when you're running either a federal for federal candidates and a statewide election, that the fact is, in many cases, the Republican primary is the race. And I wish that we had a little more competitive things, especially in some of these statewide races. But the fact is, and many Utahns, they don't look at this as a Republican race. They look at it as the race. And when you have an organization, and I think there was design in putting together the Utah Debate Commission to give it some real clout and to give it such a a good reputation that it was pretty hard for somebody to turn down the invitation for a debate, which often happens. Often it does not work to an incumbent's advantage to debate. Usually the best case scenarios, it's pretty much a draw, although we were talking about exceptions to that in Utah's history. And so I'm somewhat mystified by the tack that is being taken by the GOP right now. Will the debate commission continue on with working for and on the debate and hoping that Senator Lee will participate?
So, we will do our debates. We will have our debates on the dates that we have set forth. And, to speak to the GOP wanting to do their own debates, we've never claimed to have a monopoly on debates. We feel that any kind of interaction where you have candidates on stage interacting with each other, discussing the issues, distinguishing themselves, that's important. So if the Utah GOP wants to have their own debates, we support that fully.
Yeah. I guess something, too, that has troubled me a little bit in the dialogue about having debates either with the debate commission or now, whether it's independent, with the Republican Party basically putting it together. The idea of kind of handpicking a moderator and the idea of having input or being able to oversee questions, that troubles me deeply.
It does. It does me too. And you have sat in the seat of being a moderator at some of our debates, I should say. Yeah. And it is the moderator does have a role to play in how the debate goes. Again, to what the Utah Debate Commission does, I believe we've been very nonpartisan. We've been very independent, and we've done a very good job with selecting questions, selecting moderators, and putting on very good debates.
As far as we've obviously focused on the Senate race, but what about the 2nd District? Are you seeing some promise that there will be full participation in the 2nd District race?
So I don't feel comfortable talking about participation at this point. These are ongoing conversations, right. And we still have 2 weeks to go. We've been putting on debates since 2014. Sure. And one time, I believe, a candidate did not show up. And I fully expect that our debates will go forward.
Yeah. Erik, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining us, and we'll keep a close eye on this, and odds are we'll be chatting again.
Well, thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you so much. And we will be right back. And welcome back. This week, a Democrat-led bill aimed at preserving access to abortion nationwide failed in the U.S. Senate. West Virginia's Joe Manchin, some have called him the most powerful man in America, joined 50 Republicans on Wednesday. And meanwhile, the draft opinion leaked earlier this month has set off protests across the country. The leak of a preliminary opinion suggests that the justices may overturn Roe v. Wade. The final Supreme Court decision is expected next month. I want to bring our next guest into the program to talk about this, a decision that we made here in Utah. It's called the Trigger Law. And Senator Dan McCay, thank you so much for joining us. You were instrumental in that, of course. But before we talk about the Trigger Law, and we do some assuming that maybe it might be a shade too early to do, this leaking of this draft opinion from the Supreme Court is the first time this has happened in modern history. The justices, to say the least, ain't happy. Yeah. It doesn't matter which, left, right, in between, whatever. They're really kind of, I think, even shocked about this. Do you think the fact that the draft has been leaked somehow to Politico in this case, and then thus to all of us, is that going to affect what ultimately we see from the Supreme Court?
It's a great question. And just for everyone's background, your own, when I was in law school, I served as an editor for a Supreme Court watch list that, was publishing opinions, sending them out, or taking published opinions and would summarize them and send them out to, thousands, really, reading those reviews. I've been watching the Supreme Court for a long time. And a leak like this is rare. right?
Yeah.
It's unprecedented in our recent history, and certainly, it's been a long time since anything's been released like that. And there's a reason for it. There's a sanctity of the court. You
Right.
want to see, the court needs room to negotiate, to work within, and to try and find peace and settled law, right? If you look at the way the court's decisions come down, and most people think that the Supreme Court is extremely divided, when in fact, if you look at a lot of their recent opinions, it is unanimous. They had several Fourth Amendment case and search and seizure case last week, all unanimous. And the court generally likes to take that time. They are weighty, they're the last decision on some of these things, and they're really trying to find either a procedural place to deal with it, or then they can get to the substance, and then they deserve space, right? And the hard part about a leak like this is it really gets into their space, right? And so that's a dangerous spot. The question, like whether or not it will change the opinion, my gut says probably not. But I would keep an eye on Roberts. Chief Justice Roberts is a very astute judge, and he's done a very good job as a Chief Justice trying to broker peace. And I think if he can find middle ground, it will be potentially upholding the Mississippi law and going short of striking down Roe v. Wade. But he's got some pretty difficult people to try and negotiate with.
Yeah, there's some fancy dancing that would have to go on there, but Roberts is known for doing some real interesting threading of the needle. Let's talk about its effect on Utah, and I think it's interesting. A lot of states, Utah, but particularly is what we're going to focus on, this trigger law, anticipating that there could be a change in Roe v. Wade, and paving the way to kind of, at least right now, the bridge to nowhere, but obviously it appears it's going to go somewhere. What does the trigger law actually do in our state? Because Governor Herbert signed it.
Yeah. So in 2018, we were trying to figure out, where's the court going? States were passing, and even Utah is, the Casey standard, which is the case that came after Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade tends to be the famous one. Right. The Casey case, 1974, was basically set up this standard of, viability, right? And states have been testing, states that are more pro-life, including Utah, have been testing the boundaries of what viability means. Is it 18 weeks? Is it 16 weeks? And that debate, as it's gone by, Mississippi, I think, is the 6-week standard. So you see that test of viability, one. The other part that you see, these guys trying to wrestle with in the law is really trying to find, is this law procedurally, was it made the right way? And Utah, and myself included, I have always felt like Roe v. Wade and Casey were mostly based on fabricated, positions in the Constitution, and therefore we're on shaky ground. And so in 2018, when we were looking at these other abortion laws, we looked at this and said, well, what if one of the courts struck it down, and what would we do? And so we came up with a standard and said, look, basically we've drawn a line and said there'll be no elective abortions, right? And that there would be an allowance made for the health of the mother, and that there would be, health of the baby, and some of those things to take into consideration, and also rape and incest. And those exceptions, really, from a Utah cultural perspective, have been long accepted. And so we thought that might be a safe place to kind of draw a line around the policy and say, if the court struck it down, that's where we are. What would happen is if Roe v. Wade, if the opinion held, if Justice Alito's opinion held, Roe v. Wade and struck down, our legislative general counsel will review the opinion, and if it is viewed that a ban would be permitted by law, then he will issue a legal opinion to our legislative management committee, which will then say, yes, the trigger has been pulled, and as a result, our law takes effect. And I think that could happen pretty quickly.
Some states are actually thinking of liberalizing the laws under this, because basically, this is a way oversimplification, but it just gives the power back to the states.
Yeah.
Some are wanting to liberalize, others are wanting to tighten it up even more than I think what you're talking about. Yeah. Would there be a movement in the state of Utah to even tighten up what we're talking about, the trigger law itself?
I don't know. My gut says that it's going to be a difficult place to try and get to, just if I had to guess where it's at. I'm not sure, where I'm at myself. But I think if you're trying to really make sense of the policy and trying to, at the same time, balance the human interest weights that account for it as well, I think Utah's law is in a good spot, and I think if you look at polling data, it suggests that we have support for being in this kind of middle ground. That said, I don't rule anything out in the legislative process, and neither do you.
Boy, no kidding. Over the years, anybody who makes predictions on the Supreme Court or on the legislature, it's a fool's errand. Just a final quick thought. Governor Cox, I don't know if he's firing a shot over the bow or not, but he said, I'm comfortable where we are with the trigger law, but I would not be comfortable if we went further.
Yeah.
Is that a friendly fire over the bow?
I don't take it that way. I think Governor Cox is being asked the same questions all of us are being asked, which is, where is Utah's balance and how are we going to kind of solve this question? I don't think the governor is firing one across the bow as much as he's answering the question on where he falls philosophically on the issue.
Right. Sometimes with very important issues, and we are the United States and we go boundary to boundary and our driver's licenses are valid and so on. I'm all for states' rights, but sometimes I get a little concerned when it becomes such a patchwork and a dramatic change. A neighbor who lives here and a neighbor who lives 5 miles this way, but they're in another state. Is that going to present a problem, do you think?
No more than, for example, Nevada doesn't have a sales tax, and you don't see a lot of Utah residents just defecting to Nevada to buy all their, consumer goods, right?
Now, fireworks are a different deal.
Fireworks, totally different story, and those are sacred. I know they are. But what I'd say is, if you took the codes of the various 50 states and you tried to compare them with each other, we have a patchwork of code across the country.
That's true.
This would be no exception. And frankly, we're quite happy in the state of Utah where we are with our code. And if somebody wants to be in California or own California law, well, certainly they welcome visitors and new residents just like we do.
Senator McKay, thank you for joining us. We'll watch this closely, and odds are we'll be chatting again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Senator Dan McCay with us, and we will be right back. Welcome back. As people begin turning on their secondary water, cities across the state are rolling out water restrictions. It comes as 99% of the state is in severe drought, or worse, with 43% of Utah in extreme drought. Joining me now on our program this morning is Laura Haskell, the drought coordinator for the Utah Division of Water Resources. And Laura, as we were walking back into the studio, I said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being whoa, 10 being really, really good, where are we in this drought that we seem to be living with on and on and on?
We are pretty severe, maybe a 9, because we have had drought 8 of the last 10 years, and that's what's really affecting our water supplies, is just this ongoing condition where we keep drawing on them.
What happens when you do have an ongoing drought? You have one bad year, then it rains and snows, and we have the reservoirs, just fine, basically. But when it goes year after year after year, how stressful is that on the overall aquifers and the system in general?
It is very stressful, and that's why we're encouraging people to really talk to their local providers on how their particular water system is doing and look for any restrictions that their local water providers are putting out.
More and more, I'm hearing people comfortably talk about climate change. And many people are saying, who are a little older now, they say it's undeniable. Things really are different. They're not shoveling as much snow. There seems to be, some differences in the seasons, even when the leaves change in the fall. Climate change, how big a factor is it in our drought cycle that we're in?
Well, most of our water comes from snowpack, and so if our snowpack changes, if that melts earlier, this year it melted about 2 weeks earlier, and when things like that happen, it really can affect things. Our snowpack is a reservoir storage, and so if that's not there, we're going to have to change how we store water.
I had somebody who worked at one of the conservancy districts, and he said, when I look up at the mountains, I don't see beautiful skiing, I don't see the snow-capped mountains, I see big white reservoirs. And it really is true.
It is.
So when the snowpack is less and it melts earlier, how does that change things for the way we should look at and manage water in the state of Utah? Other than, of course, the word is conservation, but boy, it changes a lot more than that.
It does, and if we don't have those stores up in the snowpack, we're going to have to change how we store the water and change that.
How do we, as mere mortals, really make a difference. A lot of our water goes to agriculture. Utahns are really big on keeping our agriculture, kind of culture out there. But for those of us who are just kind of average citizens with a nice little yard and so on, what can we do?
About 60% of residential water is used outside on our landscaping, and most people overwater that landscaping or water, when it doesn't need it when it's raining. So that's a big area that you can save. You can wait to water until you really need it. Follow that weekly lawn watering guide that's on slowtheflow.org, and be aware of your water use.
Let's talk about slowtheflow.org. What kind of information is on that website, and what kind of a tool is it?
It is a great tool. It has our weekly lawn watering guide, which will tell you, you should probably water once this week, you should water twice this week, how many times they recommend watering. And then it has links for rebates. If you have a smart irrigation timer, that will not turn on your sprinklers. If it's rained, then your sprinklers won't come on. You can get a rebate if you purchase one of those and install it. A rebate for toilets, low-flow toilets, and different things.
For so many years, that's been an aggravating factor. And when I used to do my radio show, whenever it was raining and we were talking about conservation of water, somebody would call up and rat out somebody who was watering either a big box store or a golf course or a park or their neighbor, And it's amazing how many of us are watering while it's raining.
It is. It's so easy to set those timers and forget about them and just set them. And so that's why those smart irrigation controllers are so helpful, is because they do all the work for you.
At the highest levels of Utah government, I can remember before we would have lieutenant governors, Gary Herbert in this case years ago, doing a Slow the Flow commercial, waking up in the middle of the night in his jammies, worrying about the water flow. Will there be a high-level campaign like that? I'm already seeing the billboards, don't water yet type boards, but how high up will this go, and what will the campaign look like?
Well, we did have, the governor declared a drought emergency in April, so the governor is very aware of this and on top of that. And then there was all the water legislation that we've had. So, and we do have more funding than we've had for some of those rebates that we're doing. So there's definitely support and at those levels.
You look at the concern level for Utahns on many issues, and boy, water, air quality, all kinds of things are just creeping up and up and up every single year. As far as some of, and this is a big issue, but when you look at the future of our lakes, including the Great Salt Lake, boy, there seems to be such an emphasis on preserving, not just so we can drink water and water our grass and so on, but to preserve the very environment of Utah. It seems to be that important.
It is very important. If we lose that lake, then there's those air quality issues and some other issues, and it is downstream from everything else. So what we take out above it makes all the difference.
Give us the website one more time.
slowtheflow.org.
Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us this morning on Sunday Edition. And thanks for joining us for the program today. We hope you'll join us again next week. And music and the spoken word is coming up next.